extraordinaire, the gemologist.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Geomologist Presents. I'm here today with the roving reporter,
Hello.
my wife, Amy, and we're in, well, this is the third part of our ongoing 10-part, nominally 10-part series on the top 10 Westerns according to IMDb. Today's Western, number 3 in our series, is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance from 1962.
Yes.
So what are your overall impressions of it before we go into the details?
I liked it a lot. Um, it was, now this is just personally me, but I love Jimmy Stewart, and it's really hard not to always envision him as helping an angel get his wings.
Right.
Whereas in the past, a lot of his films are very maybe lighthearted or a very extreme drama, but very focused right on him. Whereas I feel like this one is really focused on his dilemma and him trying to find himself in a town and am I in love? Am I not in love? Am I doing right? Am I doing wrong? Usual Western.
Yeah. Well, so The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. It's a American Western film, like we said, from 1962, directed by John Ford. And actually, this is the only surprisingly, only John Ford movie in the top 10 that we're going to be reviewing. There might be at least one that we've watched already that might be like in the honorable mention uh, follow-up that we're probably going to do. But this is the only one by John Ford in the top 10 according to IMDb. So it is directed by John Ford, stars John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. The screenplay is by James Warner Ballard and Willis Goldbeck, and it is adapted again from a short story, 1953 short story written by Dorothy M. Johnson, also called The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. There's a great supporting cast as well.
Mhm.
It includes Vera Miles, Lee Marvin, Edmund O'Brien, Annie Devine, John Carradine, Woody Strode, Strothan Martin, Lee Van Cleef. So some very familiar names that you will have seen in many of these period era films. So yeah, I thought it was a really good movie. I was surprised. Thought there's some really poignant scenes. I think my only criticism so far, and I'll just probably state it out here, is that, well, I guess you know what you're gonna get. Jimmy Stewart acts like Jimmy Stewart, like he acts in every single movie with Jimmy Stewart. John Wayne acts like John Wayne, the same way he acts in every single movie with John Wayne. So I
Minus
guess,
the swagger.
yeah, it's a
He
swagger,
doesn't
right?
have the swagger in this particular film, so I don't know really when that started, but not
Yeah,
in this movie. And I do believe
I
this
he
is
kind
the
of does. He kind of does.
a little
He's
bit, but
pissed off. He's pissed off the whole
yeah.
time,
But I do think this is the first time that Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne are actually starring in a film together.
Yeah, it says together for the first time in the movie promo that's behind me, actually, which is at the top of it. It says that.
Yeah.
So together for the first time, it says James Stewart, John Wayne, written by John Ford, blah, blah, blah.
He'll always be Jimmy
Academy
Wayne.
Award winner, John Ford, the man who shot Liberty Valance.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, we know the cast. John Wayne plays Tom Donovan. Jimmy Stewart plays Rance Stoddard. Vera Miles plays his wife, Haley Stoddard. And Lee Marvin plays Liberty Valance, who's the main bad guy in this movie. I think notably, I think a cool but understated supporting cast role to me is Woody Strode as Pompey, who's Tom Donovan's right-hand man in a way, his second,
Yes.
like his backup all the time, which is kind of cool. And then we have Lee Van Cleef as well as one of Liberty Valance's henchmen. So it's interesting. Lee Van Cleef as a bad guy again. So
That's the
which will
reputation.
change soon, actually.
Yes. He
In
had
our
the
next one.
reputation.
Right. So yeah, so in contrast to other prior John Ford westerns, um, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance was shot in black and white, which is curious. And I think Ford, he said he preferred that medium over color. He said in black and white, you have to be very careful. You have to know your job. You have to lay your shadows properly. We saw that in our previous movie High Noon, how the use of black and white and shadows, and especially in Treasure of the Sierra
Treasures.
Madre, a lot of shadows and how that kind of set the mood. A lot of Hitchcock films that were in black and white, and other films. So you know, so
Have I
what you
switched you to liking black and white films yet?
I don't know. I prefer color because that's the way we see. But I do think that black and white films done well are pretty cool. They can really convey the mood, the darkness, the light. I mean, it makes it black and white, right? I mean,
It
um,
does.
so Ford said he says Ford had said, you might say I'm old fashioned, but black and white is real photography.
I believe
So
so too. And I think there's a deeper meaning for the black and white with this movie because it is such a good versus evil type
mhm,
of undertone. And you'll notice throughout the movie, it's again light and airy for the good and dark and evil when we get to others. Or even when Stewart is being conflicted by a lot of the things going on, you see kind of it's almost hazy in a way.
right, right.
And like when he's in the restaurant and Liberty Valance trips him,
Mhm.
his immediate reaction was not to get angry. It was just pick the steak up and give it to him and avoid the conflict. And I think he was just still battling to do the right thing.
Right. Right. So it's pretty interesting. Both Wayne and Stewart were 54 and 53 respectively. I think another big difference from in this movie from other Ford's Westerns is there's really no big outdoor vistas like on location filming that are prevalent in other Ford Westerns, like Stagecoach, for example.
Good
Um,
movie.
yeah. And then, and I guess Ford had said that, oh, maybe filming in black and white helped ease the suspension of disbelief necessary to accept the disparity of their ages. But according to another cinematographer, and this is why I kind of wanted to bring this up, Paramount was cutting costs at the time. So in order to make the film, Ford had to accept the black and white terms or not make it. So interesting. So another interesting tidbit in production is that the studio actually imposed, according to Lee Van Cleef, that Wayne be cast as Donovan. So and Ford didn't like the studio's intrusion, right? So, but he not that he didn't appreciate the Duke. He has Wayne in a number of his films, but he didn't like the studio telling him what to do. So
Who really does?
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean there was like a little bit just as an aside because you know that John Ford was praised for his combat documentaries for the OSS, and he was actually wounded at Midway, and I think there was a thing there, right? So there was a thing there where I guess he felt that Wayne didn't do his civic duty. So I don't know. So who
I
knows?
don't know. It seems to me like when you get to the greatest generation ever, the ones that did serve and protect us in World War II, that was kind of the resounding thought. Either you stood up and did what everybody felt you should do, which is go protect our country, or you were chastised for not doing that. And there were other things he could have done. I mean, they had rotations of everyone going in and performing for the troops, and he could have done stage plays. So, in a way, I guess I understand where he's coming from that,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah,
don't know.
so interestingly, while Jimmy Stewart, just to continue this thought, Jimmy Stewart was a noted actor pre World War II, but he did enlist. In fact, he was the first major American movie star to enlist in the war. He served in the U.S. Army. His family had deep military roots. Grandfather's fighting in the Civil War, and actually his father had served in the Spanish American War and World War One. So he enlisted in 1941, and he was actually an experienced pilot, but he reported for induction as a private in the Air Corps. So that's pretty interesting that he was in the Army Air Corps. So
Absolutely. I mean, I like him as an actor, but I
this is
feel
Jimmy Stewart.
again, yes, again, I kind of feel like that generation was just full of people that you don't realize actually did do that civic duty, unless you were alive back then, which neither
Yeah.
you and I were. But I mean, you look at it, was Jimmy Stewart did that, Elvis did that,
Yeah.
and many others. And the fact that they went, they served, and they survived and came back, that was a brutal war.
Right. Right.
So, you
Yeah.
know,
So anyway,
I'd like to pause and say anybody that served in the military or is now, our hats off to you. And we sincerely appreciate your service.
right. So curiously, even though it was kind of like a blockbuster for the time, it was produced for 3.2 million and grossed 8 million back in 62. So it was the 15th highest grossing film of that year. Um, it didn't really get a lot of like Academy Award nominations or other award nominations. The only nomination it received, and they didn't win, was for Edith's Head costumes for best costume design, black and white. So yeah, it was even though it was well received, it was did not receive any awards. So well received by the public, but did not receive any awards, which is curious. So yeah, I don't know. I know that Treasure and High Noon got awards, but it's interesting that this one did not. I guess we'll see as we continue on how the other ones did.
Would it
What
have
else is
possibly been because it was such a, I don't want to say dark.
it was
It
dark though.
it was dark, but compared to some of the others, like you get to High Noon, yes, there's some violence, but it builds to it, and then there's a shootout and it's over and you don't really see anything. But in Liberty Valance, it might have been, I think this is the first time I've saw in a movie where we're flashing back and then telling the story forward. And
Mhm.
then it wraps up to what, I don't want to give it away for those that haven't seen it, but it's not like I'm giving out spoilers,
Oh
but
yeah, well yeah. I mean, you got to know that when we're reviewing these films, they're going to be spoilers, right? There, I said it near
right.
the beginning. Ha.
Right. So we know obviously at the very beginning of the movie, when he's sitting down to give his side, that he did befriend John Wayne's character, and he did shoot Liberty Valance. And I'm just wondering if maybe in the end, maybe we're knocking on the door of Vietnam and everything that was going on with that, maybe it just wasn't as well received.
Well, but it was by the public, right? It was kind of a
It
blockbuster of
was,
the
but I
time.
meant like for the Academy Awards to
Yeah,
give them something for it, because would that be promoting the violence of it? But I mean, he gave all the other Westerns accolades for it.
yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
don't think it was done distastefully at all.
no, but it is again like unlike Ford's earlier work, not a lot of large, big vistas. It's very personal. There's only a few sets, right, that they show the town, the diner, the house, right? So the office. So it's pretty, it's like it's definitely like soundstage. It's not out on location with the big vistas that you're portraying frontier life. So it's a grittier, less romantic portrayal of frontier life than
Mm.
has had previously been done, especially by Ford. So I guess we should talk about the music.
Yes, I will say I didn't dislike the music, but it is not as I don't want to say inviting, that's not the word I'm looking for, but it's not as enrapturing as like you listen to the music from Treasure of Sierra Madre and you know it immediately. You hear that riff from High Noon and you know it immediately. And Who Shot Liberty Valance? Yes, I recognize some of the music, but it doesn't stick with me.
Yeah, it
It,
was
it it's not as suspenseful and enrapturing, in my opinion, to the movie as the other ones were. It didn't play that pivotal part in the movie that I was expecting.
right. I don't know. The music actually to me seemed a little generic, but it was composed by Cyril Mockridge, and in the scenes involving Haley's relationship and Donovan with Donovan and Stoddard, there was some reprised music from Young Mr. Lincoln. So maybe that's why it seemed a little generic. That it's been it seemed very typical of movies of the time, that score, and that's because it was used multiple times. So
Yes.
uh,
It was not, like I said, it just didn't engulf me, and I don't hear the music from Liberty Valance and go, oh yeah, that movie or this scene, or I remember the clock, or I remember the hills or the dust being kicked up in Sierra Madre. It doesn't feel like it was part of the movie.
right, and even the main theme that opens the picture was used by Mockridge, a very similar, different form, but very, very similar to River of No Return with Robert Mitchum and Marilyn Monroe from 10 years prior. And what's
Mhm.
really funny is the song that we all hear, "The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance." It was a top 10 hit uh, for Gene Pitney, written by Burt Bach Hal David. That song wasn't even in the movie.
No,
So
it
the
wasn't.
song, "The Man Who Shot Liberty
Liberty
Valance," that one,
Valance. Yeah.
that's not in the movie. So, which is pretty interesting.
I was
So,
disappointed it wasn't, because it would
yeah,
have actually connected. I don't even know. Was it even written at the same time or released before or after?
I let's see, it was.
Because
I
it
have to.
seems to me like it
It
didn't
was
pick.
released after.
Yeah,
So
so it was maybe everybody felt the same way I did. We need to give this movie some music
yeah.
that works for it. I mean, that was my only criticism to the movie.
Oh,
It's well
it was
acted.
written contemporarily, but they didn't use it. So the picture was released in April of 1962, and the song entered the Billboard Hot 100 that week and peaked at number 4 in June. So yeah, but it just wasn't. It's curious that it wasn't in there. It was not used in the film. He
No.
said that Pitney said in an interview that he was in the studio about to record the song when Bacharach informed him that the film just came out, so it wasn't going to be used. So I guess there was like, it was supposed to be used in the film, but didn't get used in the film.
It
Curious.
wasn't even in the trailer for the movie theater, which I will put in the notes down below so people can go look at it.
Yeah.
And even the trailer was in black and white. So I was shocked when I saw the film poster was in color.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, here's a blurb that I found here, that although it was not used in the film, the song "The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance," there is a disagreement about whether the song had been intended to appear in it. Pitney said the recording session was paid for by Paramount, and it was midway through the effort that he found out that it was not going to be used in the film. So there you go. That's kind of funny. All
Huh.
right, so let's get to the film. Unless you have anything else about cast, production, um, we'll talk about the cast and how they do, I think, during the course of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would mention is IMDb gives it a rating of 8.1 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally would have given it, now acting is a different thing, story is a different thing, but overall enjoyability of the movie, I give it about a 7.
Right. I was not expecting the twist at the end.
I was not either, and I don't want to
When
give
I,
that away,
right. Well, we're going to talk about it. So,
most likely, but not until we get there.
all right. So it starts out that now a U.S. Senator Ransom Stoddard and his wife Haley arrive in Shinbone, a frontier town in an unnamed western state, but it seems like it's Arizona, New Mexico, somewhere around there. And they're there to attend the funeral of their old friend Tom Donovan.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then a newspaper reporter, like this young, ambitious newspaper reporter, asks them, why are you going to attend the poor funeral of this rancher? And Stoddard starts talking about the events that happened some 25 years ago. So it is told in flashback, and I thought that was, I don't know if I can't know. I mean, I'm not a movie scholar, so I wouldn't know if this is the first time flashback was used, but I think it's very interesting use of that construct. I know in general, Amy, you don't like flashbacks.
Not in TV shows. Um, Movies can be a little bit different if it's a one flashback and then bringing the story in and it wraps it up. Because I think they did a good job of asking the question and James Stewart. I'm still going to call him Jimmy. He's always
Yeah.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
I think he did a good job of starting it off and giving you that ability to get wrapped into the story. Okay, how did this really happen? Why are we here? So I think it answered some big questions for me. But generally speaking, I'm not a flashback kind of person, nor do I like capes on superheroes.
Right. That's someone else we forgot to mention, but we'll get to it. So it's so interestingly, so it's 25 years ago. This is what happened. As a young lawyer, Rance is coming to the territory where Shinbone is located, and he's beaten and robbed by infamous outlaw Liberty Valance and his gang. He is rescued by Donovan and his handyman, Pompey, and they find Rance and take him to Shinbone, where the then Tom's girlfriend Haley treats his wounds. And then Rance learns that Vance is frequently terrorizes Shinbone and the surrounding country. And that's because the local marshal, Link Appleyard, who is actually played by Andy Devine, who you best know as the voice of Friar Tuck from Robin Hood. He's like in every single Western movie at this time, it seems.
And he speaks exactly the same.
Yeah, very distinct voice. Yeah, right. Like Stewart and Wayne, he plays the same character effectively. They just have different names. So Appleyard is too cowardly to stop him and says that Valance only understands force, but Rance is determined to bring him down somehow through justice.
Right. Because he's trying to open up a law office and he wants to bring him to justice the right way, in his opinion. But in a Western town like that, I think the dilemma was it was either very quote unquote lawful when people decided to, or it was nobody was going to do anything. They'll look the other way. And if he gets shot, oh, well, frontier justice. But
yeah, so Rance seems like a very like humble man. He busts his tables at the local steakhouse. That's the same place where Haley works. And he befriends an editor of the Shinbone Star. He learns that Haley is illiterate, so he opens a school. So he's about, building up the community. Very altruistic individual. And then he starts, and he's also a man of peace, generally speaking. But it does happen that there's a great scene, and I like the scene a lot because I've seen it in other movies and shows. And that's you want to talk about the scene where Valance and his gang come into the steakhouse?
I kind of mentioned it already, but I'll let you tell it.
So Valance and his men come into the steakhouse. They bully everyone. He kind of makes a mess of stuff. They actually trip. They trip Rance when he's bringing him the food, and it actually happens to be Donovan's food. So Donovan actually steps up and confronts Valance, which is very interesting.
I think it was the first time in the movie that he did that too.
Right, or that anyone did. I mean, there's definitely like maybe a mutual respect. There's not really like maybe a rivalry because Donovan is a tough rancher, So in any case, so
never get in the way of a man's steak.
Yeah. The situation is diffused by Donovan stepping up to this bully, and Valance and his gang kind of take off, but with the "we're gonna get you later" type of rhetoric. And actually, I recently saw this in I think, what is it, The Gilded Age, where there's a similar scene in that, and it was equally tense in Liberty Valance just as it was in The Gilded Age, where some people come into a diner and harass the folks there at the diner, and it's well known that they do this, and someone stands up, and then and because of that they gotta run. They gotta get out of town. But here, Rance then, after this situation, starts wanting to practice shooting. Tom takes Rance to his ranch for shooting lessons, and then he shows Rance all these renovations because he's making a house, because he's planning to marry Haley. So then there's this thus begins this sort of a love triangle, right, between Haley, Rance, and Tom Donovan. What did you think of that, Amy?
I thought it was an interesting thing. I think they threw it in there just because I mean, looking at Haley, you can kind of see that she was in this relationship with Tom Donovan early on, like, okay, he's my only choice and he's probably the best choice around. But then Rance comes to town and she's like, wow, look at him. He's going to do something. He's going to make the town better. He's going to fight for state rights. He's going to fight for me. He's going to educate the town. Wow, this one's going to make something of it. I think I like him. I think it just, the fact that he took an interest in making herself better
Right.
rather than you make me look good.
Right. Yeah, it's a different philosophy that they have an approach to this courting of this woman. I would note that the movie is like 123 minutes, so 2 hours and 3 minutes, but it goes by pretty fast because
It does.
I mean the action goes because after this there's this thing about electing delegates to become for the upcoming statehood convention at the territorial capital. So they want to nominate Tom, but you know he
He
doesn't
didn't want
want to.
any part
He
of
doesn't
it.
want any part of that politics, and maybe that's a mistake. I don't know. We'll see. But ultimately, Rance and Peabody are elected, and then Valance, who's hired by the cattle barons, oppose the statehood because they don't want control. They don't want. I guess that's interesting. The cattle barons opposing statehood. That's curious because maybe the way they have it, the status quo is good for the cattle barons, and they have this person, this lawlessness to intimidate people. Who knows? But anyway, they hire Valance to intimidate the voters, and Valance challenges Rance to a gunfight. Tom offers to assist Rance in leaving town, but Rance declines. But then Valance and his gang vandalize Peabody's office and almost kill him. I thought he was dead, actually. Did you think he was dead?
The only reason why I didn't is they're not going to pay that much money to have Jimmy Stewart in a movie and kill him off.
No,
So,
no, no. Well, Peabody, his buddy from the newspaper. Remember they injured.
Peabody, I did think that he was going to be killed, but at the same time, we didn't actually ever see him dead. We just saw him being beaten.
Right, right.
And not intensely. I mean, it's not
It was pretty
like
rough. It was a pretty rough scene. It was a pretty brutal scene, I thought.
it was, but there wasn't like blood going everywhere. It wasn't
Well, it's
gory.
black and white.
It was not gory,
Because
and
it's black and white.
I thought it was done very tastefully.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the beauty of black and white is you don't really see all that gore, but he got beat pretty badly,
He
actually.
did.
And then Branch sees this and he goes to confront Valance. Valance is really drunk, but even drunk, he easily wounds and disarms Branch, is about to kill him. And then
Well, he shoots him in the arm that he was holding his pistol in, so then he had to pick it up and use his other arm.
yeah, so then so in the scene, Rance retrieves the gun and shoots and kills Valance. And then he returns to Erickson's, the steakhouse where Haley treats his wounded arm, and then Tom comes in and he sees Haley and her affection for Rance, and he's pretty upset. He gets drunk, but then he gets the marshal to force the rest of Valance's men out of town, and then he sets fire to his house, but he's rescued by Pompey. So Tom goes through a crisis, and then it switches scenes to later on in the story, an indeterminate amount of time. There's a territorial convention, and Rance is nominated for a delegate for Congress. But then what? He's accused of being a murderer, right? So,
Well, yeah, that he's using that to get his votes, even though Rance didn't even want to be known that way. He didn't want that said. He wanted to win on his own merits.
right.
Again, the good versus evil, and not using something evil to make yourself look good.
Mm-hmm. And then so Branch is going to withdraw because he is a good man. He's like, oh man, if people think I'm a murderer, how can I do this? It's not going to work for the state. But then Donovan arrives, and he tells Branch that he's the one who killed Valance.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's very interesting. Yeah, they have like I think it's kind of a cool, a unique tool. I don't know, it's probably not unique to this movie, but it's a cool use of like a different camera perspective. So they probably redid this shot, or maybe they did the same shot from using different cameras and then edited it together. But it does show that Tom sees what's going on, and then he knows that Rance can't beat Valance even against the drunk Valance. So when Valance is about to finish Rance, Pompey's with him. So Tom asks Pompey for his rifle, and he shoots the rifle at Valance the same time Rances fires. And he
Mhm.
encourages Rance to accept the nomination because Tom, even though upset, he still thinks that this is better for the woman that he loves, Haley. And then he
And I
walked,
think he thought it was better overall for the state. I
yeah,
think he was putting his own feelings to the back burner
and
and
success, right?
correct and doing it better because he could have easily owned up and said, "Oh no, he shot at him, but I really killed him," and he could have been the one nominated. He could have been the one getting all the accolades, but he
Right.
put himself behind to put his friend first.
I don't know if they were friends, but I think
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know if they were friends.
it says
I think
that he went to the funeral of Tom. I think there's levels in friendships, and I think they were more than an acquaintance. I think they had a common goal, and I think they were working towards it. I wouldn't say they were enemies, so
yeah,
friendish.
I tend to think that Tom was still in love with Haley, and he saw that Haley could do better with Rance and this kind of upward movement, to Congress, senator, et cetera. And he was right, but then it destroyed Tom, right? He was
Yeah, he was
he
never the
died of
same.
never the same, and he died a poor uh drunken rancher, really. So then
Yeah.
we jump back to the present after that revelation. That's why I think it's really well done. It seems like the scenes, I did appreciate that the scenes were all like compact. This is what happens. This is an important scene. Not a lot of filler, I guess. So I felt it went really fast, relatively speaking, when we were watching it.
It was. It was very good. The only thing that I thought it was lacking was the music.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
to me, a lot of times, if I leave the movie theater, I have a theme song in my head. For instance, Mission Impossible. Who doesn't know that theme song? You can hear it anywhere and you think of scenes in the movie. But here it's like I can hear Who Shot Liberty Valance, but it doesn't flash me back to the movie. They're so disconnected. And
yeah,
I'm very much into, I think it has to be a whole package for me.
right. Yeah. So we return to the present.
Hmm.
And we hear Rance's rising political achievements. He became governor, senator, ambassador to the UK. He's probably going to be a vice presidential nominee in the upcoming election. These fill all the intervening years, and the newspaper decides that publishing the story would ruin Rance's legacy because it all came from him killing this outlaw. But he didn't really. But we know that he didn't really kill the outlaw, right?
Right.
Um, so so he burns the reporter's notes and leaves Rance to conduct Tom Donovan's funeral. And then when Rance asked why, the editor says, "Well, when the legend becomes fact, you got to print the legend, right?" Which is
Absolutely.
curious. Yeah, I think that's a theme that's an interesting theme that we will revisit in other movies because I feel like in The Unforgiven that kind of came about too, something like that, which was pretty interesting. Um, so anyway, they return to Washington. Rance and Haley return to Washington, and then Haley admits placing a cactus rose on Tom's coffin, which Tom knew that Haley liked this, and Rance thanks the train conductor for the railroad's courtesies, and then the conductor reminds us that everyone thinks that it was Rance who killed Liberty Valance, and he says nothing's too good for the man who shot Liberty Valance, and then end credits, right? So it's a pretty tight movie, despite being 2 hours and 3 minutes,
Hmm.
and I did enjoy it. It's despite it being black and white, despite Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne acting like they always do. But it was a good story, very interesting. Um, Sacrifice for the one that you love. I don't know, sacrifice for the greater good. However you interpret what Tom Donovan does, it ends up being like the hero of the story, really, and it's all that has been created. The reputation of Brant Stoddard, is it legend or is it just lie? I don't know. It got me thinking stuff like that. I don't know how you felt.
I just felt like we were watching um all of the characters, including Liberty Valance, go through this whole this is what drives me, and I'm going to go forward with what I want, even though I know it's not going to work. And Liberty Valance is like, well, I'll just shoot him. I'll just take him out. I'll just eliminate my threat.
Mhm.
Whereas everyone else is like, just go away, just leave. It's not exactly what they wanted. And I really do feel as though it was more of a battle of good versus evil inside themselves as well as, outside.
Yeah, I don't think
Obvious.
they really made it show that Valance had no redeeming qualities, and you really needed to get rid of him, but there was a reluctance to do so. And then you're kind of rooting for Rance when he finally, and you're rooting for Rance, but then when when Valance, as drunk as he is in that was a great scene. As drunk as he is in that scene, he like taunts him, right? He like plays with them, like, oh, I can shoot your arm. Oh, go ahead and get the gun. I'm gonna kill you if you get the gun, type of thing. And then he gets and then Valance gets killed, from the
Mhm.
side by Tom and Pompey. So yeah, it was cool. It was a cool movie. I like that.
I liked it, but again, I would only give it a 7 out of 10. Not
Huh.
because of the acting, just because, first of all, it was longer than I thought it needed to be.
Oh, you thought there was filler. Okay. I didn't think there was filler.
I
Maybe I
felt,
maybe I tuned out when there was filler.
I mean, yes, the movie moved along quickly, but I felt like there were quite a bit of bits and pieces that didn't need to be there. Like, yes, they could have captured the whole teaching her how to read and having the school start. That was, I think, semi-pivotal.
Hmm.
But how many times they showed Rance getting beaten up, or I mean, they spent a long time on here's how you shoot a gun. And I mean, obviously John Wayne got paid a lot of money and they were going to show that, but even taking him to the inn after he was beaten up off of the stagecoach,
Hmm.
I mean, why did we have that whole fight and I'm going to protect the good of this woman? We never heard about her after that, and it just didn't, it seemed disjointed to me. And then you get to basically the restaurant where Haley was. They called her down to help,
Hmm.
and there was a whole lot of talk about, oh, starting up your law practice and making a sign. And that, yes, okay, I see that as somewhat, but I think they spent so much time on little filler things that could have been taken out. To me, it was distracting and you didn't even notice it. So I
Yeah.
guess it's six of one, half dozen of another, right?
Right. Right. So just to conclude, you have anything else before you conclude then?
Well, I was going to say, as far as what game module would
Oh,
I
that's right.
use? Um,
RPG.
I almost feel like a little bit like this could be Deadlands, their new horror version.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of weird in it, but I mean, I think any Western would
You
do.
you could build it in.
I think a classic Western RPG, like Boot Hill would work for this, of course. The aces and eights that we played with Jason Connerly. There's what's another one? Another core Western without the weird stuff. Well, there's unfortunate. Well, I don't know if it's unfortunate. There's a lot of westerns that have like weird stuff in it, and this one doesn't have any weird stuff. But I guess you could do western system that you like from DCC, Weird Frontiers to Call of Cthulhu, down darker trails, but drop out all the stuff. It just depends on what. But I think like a game like Boot Hill, which or any game that does the shooting really well, I think would
Hmm.
would work. That's why Aces and Eights would be another one. So there's another one. Oh, a GURPS Western. The GURPS would actually be really good because the way the GURPS does combat, especially, it's like 1 second increments. So I think GURPS Western could work really well here too, because of that. Because it's kind of grounded in more like reality or realistic combat. Um,
Hmm.
so I mean, I think even another one that does gun combat really well is Interlock that we use for Cyberpunk, but I'm sure there's a Western module or hack somewhere.
What would you think about using cohorts with it?
Oh, like mean like a cohorts, well, Octune Cthulhu.
Yes.
I think you could. I mean, it's more. I think that game is more cinematic in a way, but
Well, I mean, you could make this cinematic. I mean, you
yeah.
could make the shooting of Liberty Valance very cinematic, and you can have, the you have the one player playing John Wayne's character,
Yeah.
he could roll and miss. And then Jimmy's character ends up shot. I mean, you could change the verse however you wanted, but
Well, that's why maybe like a generic Savage Worlds could work too, right? With Valance being an ace. Um, obviously the
right.
characters are aces, right? And you have his gang being extras, but yeah, I think that would work. And you could strip out the Deadlands weird and just use like basic, basic Savage Worlds. We'll see what you would see.
Or
Yeah,
even maybe Delta Green. That one seems a little I don't want to say mean, but very battle oriented, because I
well,
could
yeah,
see
it's
where you
realistic
could,
combat that's very deadly.
right, I could see the shotguns misfiring or the rifles not firing, or when Liberty Valance goes to shoot the pistol out of Ren's hand, that there could be backfire and he gets hit by it, or his gun jams, or any number of things. Somebody in the restaurant that he walked out of could shoot him,
Or
even if
even
they
the
would.
restaurant scene would be different. I think there would be like a if you had a player playing Tom Donovan, then there would probably be a fist fight at the very
Right,
least,
but
right? Well, players would change the story would be changed for sure, right?
mhm.
And then you'd have to play out the combat and see what really happened. You wouldn't tell it as a flashback. You tell it as like in real time, I think.
Right, just starting right from
From
where he's
where
already at. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, when he comes into town into Shinbone.
well, even I think you can fast forward through that. That's where I thought a lot of the meat of stuff that could be taken out was.
Yeah.
There was a lot of interplay there that didn't need to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think
And
if you started with the scene where he's coming into Shinbone and well, I guess you could start with the robbery of the carriage scene
you
and
could, and then skip to where he's now in the restaurant and
but
they're
that could be
there.
totally different. You know how players are. That could be totally different.
Oh,
It
I'm
could
one
end
that goes off the rail all the time. You know that.
no, but players aren't going to surrender. They're not going to give up. And then you have to I mean, if it was like one player, I think like a gang, like a Savage Worlds, because it could be swingy and you could get lucky. Um, but how how quickly is someone incapacitated by a boss and a bunch of extras? I don't know.
I don't know.
It's
So,
interesting.
yeah.
So I guess what I was going to conclude with is that there was actually a 2014 Western stage play by Jethro Compton based on this movie and by the story by Dorothy M. Johnson. And it premiered in London. I never heard of it, actually. I just thought it was very interesting. And they actually make Rance a young scholar from New York City who travels west to start a new life. And they changed the name to Two Trees, not Shinbone. But the play is billed as a classic story of good versus evil, law versus the gun, one man versus Liberty Valance, a tale of love, hope, and revenge set against the vicious backdrop of a lawless society. You think that's accurate?
Somewhat, but I think it's two against Valance, not one.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's all we have, right?
Yes, except you didn't give your score out of 10.
Oh, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm just going by the IMBD. I'm just going to say that I like the movie. It was engaging. It's a good movie. It gives me inspiration. Most importantly, it gives me inspiration to run games set in the West.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think any of the movies that we've watched so far or coming up would do that to us, but I don't know. There's part of me that I liked the movie, but then there's also part of me that's like, would I actually want to watch it again? And
I don't know.
that's iffy.
I mean, there's a lot better movies. And in fact, just to give our listeners and watchers a preview or a hint, the next three movies are going to be by the genius of Sergio Leone. So we're going to be getting into spaghetti Western time.
Which is funny, because then we can talk about why did they call it a spaghetti Western?
Right, definitely will. So all right. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.
Good night
And good
and
rolling.
good rolling.
Go watch some Westerns.
Absolutely.